is Daf Kuf. Wow, it's pretty far. Kuf Mem Dalid, 144, around a month away from finishing. And I know he got up to the top of the page, but I'm going to start from the Mishnah real quickly just so that we can orient ourselves, because obviously the Mishnah is what we're going to discuss today. So it says the Mishnah Daf Kuf Mem Gimel Amabet, might be a review for some. Hiniach Banim Gedolim Ketanim, right? A father dies, I'm talking about this all along, and he leaves children that are adults and minors. Of course, why that matters, we'll see in a second. Says the Mishnah, Shvichu Gedolim et Nechasim. If, let's say, the Gedolim, the adult children who can work on the field, made the value of the field or the property greater, Hishbichu le'emtza, that value goes to the middle, meaning it's split among all of them. It goes to the estate, not to the individual. However, Imamru, if they say, before they work on the field, Ra'u ma sheniach abba, right? Look at what my father left behind for me. I'm going to arei anu means us, the older children, osim va'ochlim. We're going to invest and we're going to take the profit from what we invest. Then they've clearly said we're doing it for ourselves, not for the estate. Hishpichul atzman, and then the extra profit goes to them. And says the Mishnah, the same thing is true if, let's say, a man, remember we had the cases in the previous Mishnayot, a lot of cases where, remember, a woman does not necessarily inherit, but very often a husband would say, I want to leave my things to my wife and my sons, right? And then he makes a Yerusha for his wife. So if she gets a portion of the Yerusha, and she says, and she invests, she takes the cows and makes milk and it goes up, then still Hashpichol the Atzman, that goes up. Sorry, Hashpichol the Emtza, that goes to the middle, goes to the group. Imam Rabba, if she says, look what my husband left behind for me, I'm going to work on it and use that profit, Hashpichol Atzma, then it goes to her. So the same halacha. So says the Gemara, the bottom of Kuf Mem Gimel Mebet, Amar Rav Chaviva Breder Rav Yosef Breder Rava, Mishmei de Rava, Lo Shanu El Sheshavchu Nechasim Machmatat Nechasim. Right, this whole Mishnah only makes sense if the property went up because it went up on its own. Meaning you did, and we'll see cases in a minute, where you did minimal effort for it to go up, right? The money was invested in the S&P 500 and it went up, let's say. That's obviously not a concept they had, but it went up passively. But if someone had to take the money and take the seeds, let's say, from the field and plant them and harvest them, and it grew, then obviously the one who did that effort is the one who gets the value. Then it goes to the person who did that work. So that was what Rav Chaviva said, Rav Yosef, in the name of Rava. Asked him, is that true? Amy, is that true? Rabbi Chanina was said, and now turn the page, almost, right? Even if the father only left them in Udaina, right? And Udaina is something that hi Rosa. Udaina is something that top word now of Kuf Mem Daled Amud Aleph, sorry. Excuse me. Odaina is the Rashbam explains, it's basically a pit, and you leave behind the field. People can come and they pay you $10 to draw water from your field. It could be, of course, anything like that, right? A bathhouse that's working on its own, or something that's working on its own, and basically people come and pay you to use it. So the Mishnah said, the statement of Rabbi Chanina was haschar la'emtza. In that case, if the father left them in Udaina, and before they established, before they split up the estate, it went up by $10,000 because a lot of people came, then it goes to the group. Udaina demachun atzmahu, right? And Udaina, though, why in the world would that be true about an Udaina? It's machmat atzmohu, and if it's machmat atzmo, right? In that case, basically, you said that it should go to the person. Sorry, machmat atzmo, it should go to everybody, right? So says the Gemara, Shani Udaina. The Udaina is a little different, because in the Udaina, the linetiruta hudavidi, right? The main thing you need to do for the Udaina is you don't have to actually work it, right? The well in this case is on its own, but you have to watch it, right? And in order to watch it, afilu kitanim nami matzum naturally. An Udaina, even kitanim, even minors are able to watch it. And what that therefore means, there's a lot of different debates about what that means, but the simplest explanation is that basically, because it's something that anyone could have done, it's not a service that the older children did that no one else could have done. If there was a service that the older children did that no one else could have done, then they get to keep the money because they're the ones who were needed for it to happen. But in this case, anybody could watch it, right? You don't need to be an adult. You don't need to be talented just to be a shomer. You just stand there and prevent a report if people are not there. And so therefore, it goes to Emtza, it goes to all of them together. Now, now the Mishnah continues. This is where I know we got up to yesterday. So now we're at the 2 dots, 3 lines from the top, 4 lines from the top. If the person says, Re'u ma sheniach abba, right? If the son, remember the Mishnah's case, you had big sons, younger sons, the older sons said, look, Re'u ma sheniach abba, look, this is what our father left behind for me, for us. Hare anu osim va'ochlim. We're going to invest what he left, and we're going to eat the benefit. We're going to get the extra write-up from that. So then the Mishnah said, Hishpichu la'atzman, right? Then it goes to those people themselves, not to anybody else. So says the Gemara, what about there's a case? The case was Rav Safra. Rav Safra had a father who died, right? And his father left money. Shavak avu azuzi. His father left cash. So let's say there were 3 brothers. I'm making this up, of course, and he left $1,000 for the 3 brothers, right? So they're going to split it up at some point, but they haven't split it up yet. So Shaklinu, so Rav Safra takes all the money, I'm not sure how he got it, and Avadu Iska, and he went and he did a business deal. And his plan, right, was to take all the profit from that business deal. So he invested $1,000. He bought, I don't know, some property, or let's say he bought clothing. They sold it for $1,500. Rav Safra wanted to keep the extra $500. Right? Because he said, I took it, I invested it. Now, he didn't say what our Mishnah says you have to say, which is, I'm doing this for myself. So why is he allowed to keep it? So atu ache, so the brothers came and said, why do you get to keep the $500 you made, right? Tavu bedina kamei de Rava. They came to Rava and they said, we should share on it also, because he didn't announce that he wanted to do it for himself. So Amar lahu, so Rava said to them, 1 second. Rav Safra Gava Rabu. Rav Safra is a great man. He's a rabbi. It's a great man here just means a great man, but he's a rabbi. Look, the fact that he went ahead and did this clearly shows, even though he didn't announce that he's doing it for himself, it shows that he's doing it for himself because he doesn't usually do this kind of stuff. Meaning he spends most of his time, Shavak Girsa means in teaching, right, in studying, learning. So he spends his time doing that. If he took the money and went and invested it, he clearly intended to do it for himself and not for other people. And therefore, it's as if he announced, I'm doing this for myself. And that's the case where our Mishnah said, you get to keep it. So that's Rava's explanation. So now it's sort of a little bit of an add-on to the Mishnah, which is you have to announce it, but if it's obvious...
This time listening means that he doesn't engage in business?
I'm sorry? Sorry, what was that, James? I don't know if... It's not my connection, right? James, we don't hear you very well, in and out. You guys hear me okay, right? My connection's okay? Okay, good. So it's not me. Okay, so we're going to keep going. Maybe you'll come back with that question. The Mishnah continued and said that a woman, remember again, the case of the woman has to be an unusual case because a woman does not usually inherit, but as we've seen many, many cases, it was very common for a husband who was dying to say, I want some of my things to go to my wife to sustain her, right? So we had all the cases before. So like even yesterday we had one, right? So Isha shishpichat nechasim. Let's say she is one of the inheritors. She gets half, let's say, or she gets a portion, and she makes that more valuable. So again, the Mishnah said shpicha le'emtza, it goes to the whole group. But if she said, I want it for myself, then it's herself. Ask the Gemara. I'm sorry, I spoke it out already. Isha b'nechsei yatmi ma'avidite. There's the Gemara asked the question that I preempted, which is why in the world is a woman inheriting if there are children, right? All the stuff goes to the children. So Reb Yirmiyah says, Reb Yirmiyah, right, the case we've been talking about, but Isha Yoreshet. It's talking about a case where a woman is given property to be Yoresh by her husband, which, as we said before, right, a woman this is Rashbam's explanation, is that, there's many cases where a husband would say, I want to give some Yerusha to my my wife, right? Sorry, it's not the Rashbam. That's Tosas' explanation. The Rashbam is a long.
Actually, the Rashbam says that Reuben been married by the daughter of Shimon,
no, I agree. I was just saying you're correct. So that's Tosas' explanation, which is a much simpler one. Rashbam's got a much more complicated explanation that basically she married her husband's brother, right? So she married.
She didn't marry her husband's brother.
She was the daughter. Sorry, you're right. Sorry, I'm a little tired. You're correct. Thank you. She was the daughter, right? So she married her uncle, right? So meaning she was, Reuven and Shimon were brothers. Shimon had a daughter, whatever we'll call her, Leah in this case, and Shimon died, and Leah married Reuven, right? So basically, she essentially will inherit not because she's a wife that inherits, but because because her husband, what the Yerusha would go from Ruvain, who dies, to his dead brother Shimon, and Shimon's daughter Leah is now the wife of Ruvain. So in this case, an Isha is Yoreshet. Correct.
Ellie, are you able to hear me better now?
Now I can hear you. Yes.
In the case of Rav Safra, we were saying he doesn't have to declare since he was studying Torah. Does that tell us that he's a scrupulous person, or that he doesn't deal in business? So the fact that he's doing something very different than what he normally does shows us that it was for himself.
Right. I think the second one. It's not so. This again, it's the question here is always intent, at least in this Mishnah. So the question is when a person's investing, and just to be clear, some of it also has to do with the risk, right? What risk are you taking? Because your business deal could go south, right? You could lose money. So I think that's another question that you have to think about, right? There's upside and downside. But the point of our Mishnah is that generally, if a person doesn't say that they're doing it for themselves, they are representatives of the estate, and they're doing it on behalf of the estate. So anything that goes up for the estate. Rav Safra, because he wasn't a normal businessman, it wasn't his normal procedure, he took time off basically of his busy learning schedule to do this. We assume he's doing it for himself.
But the other part to it,
a tailor also. The same rule would apply.
What was that? Sorry.
If he was a tailor, the same rule would apply.
So I guess presumably if he was a tailor and he went and invested and did something that was very different than his work, presumably. I'm not sure the details.
but here the only reason that it actually works is because his siblings are minors.
Correct. You're saying, right, because some of them couldn't do business deals.
Right.
Right. But again, that's what we said before, that if there was something that they all could do, right, like watching a guardhouse, right, the fact that he did it doesn't make him any different. Any one of them could have done that. He didn't add anything individual, basically. Okay, so continues the wife, as we said.
Rashbam here says this is it seems a little different than what you said. It seems to me that this woman is inheriting the grandfather. It says, Bat Shimon Metu, they all died. V'yashu b'nei Ruven ubat Shimon nichse Yaakov avi avihen. She's inheriting the grandfather.
Correct. So there's three generations here, right? Because otherwise there's no Yerusha. So Reuven and Shimon get married. Shimon has a daughter named Leah, let's say. And again, I think the Rashbam might do it the opposite way, but stick with me. Reuven marries Shimon's daughter. Reuven's allowed to marry his niece. It was pretty common, like Avraham and Sarah, right? So Reuven married his niece Leah, and then Reuven died, right? So when Reuven dies, all the Yerusha that goes from their grandfather, we'll call him Yaakov in this case, because that's his name in the Torah, right, goes to his sons, who are both dead. Reuven and Shimon are both dead, but it goes equally to each son. Let's just say there's no Bechor. Reuven's inheritance goes to his sons. Shimon's inheritance goes to his daughter, because he has no sons. It turns out that when Reuven dies, that inheritance goes equally, let's just say not equally, but it goes both. The inheritance of Yaakov, the grandfather, goes to a combined estate that consists of the wife of Reuven and the children of Reuven. And now the wife of Reuven goes out and makes money from that estate, right? So that's the case. So according to the Rashbam.
And she's the daughter of Shimon. And Shimon is the son of Yaakov.
Correct. And Shimon's not alive. So now the Mishnah continued and said that if a woman says it, right, then she also gets to keep it. It says Mar Pshita, right? Of course, that seems to be obvious, right? Why is it any different than a woman than we just said for a son? Right? If she's a Yoresh, she should be a Yoresh. Says Gemara, well, it's not true, because Ma'atema, you would have thought, Kivan delav darka lemitrach, that, and this is the opposite, we're going to ask a question in a second, that since it's generally not the matter of a woman to go and invest property, in those times, right, she stayed home. She wasn't someone who's going out and investing. And so since it's not the usual thing for her to do it, Afal gav delo parish, right, even though she didn't say, I'm doing it for myself, you might think it's as if she did say that. And similar to the rabbi before, right? Kimo de parish dami, kamashma, that's not the case. Unless she says it, she has to say it, and only if she says it expressly will it be her own thing. The Imam Ran, the Mishnah continued and said, if she said, look at what my husband left for me, I'm going to work on it and I'm going to keep the profit, then ishpicha latzma. Says more again, pshita, so that should be obvious. You said the same halacha about any yorshim. Answers the Gemara, well, I might have thought that kivan de shvicha la milta, right? Because since it is the might be different, that it's something that's very mishabech. Shvicha here means a shevach. It's a big praise for her. the Amri, because people are going to say, Katarcha kamiyatmi. Look, she's working so hard for these yitomim. So because it gives her a lot of street cred, it gives her a lot of shavach, a lot of praise, you might think that achuli achla, then in fact she is working for the yitomim. Kamash Malan, that's very nice. But if she says I'm doing it for myself, she means I'm doing it for myself. So don't take her charity for granted. You might have thought that. Continues the Gemara. So she's basically like anybody else, is what we're saying. Continues the Gemara.
Covers both sides. Really, the Gemara covers both sides of the
Correct.
discussion.
We're around halfway down at the bet. Mine has a bet. I don't know if everyone has that. Says Rabbi Chanina. Amar Rabbi Chanina, Hamesi Isha lebeno gadol babayit. This is a fascinating halacha, which doesn't, I don't think we still utilize it, but we'll see. We'll discuss it. So let's say, says Rabbi Chanina, a person marries off his son to a woman, right? So meaning Hamesi Isha, he marries a woman to his son, beno gadol. We're going to see it's his oldest son in his house. So basically, in those days, as we've discussed very often, the chuppah was often a house that you made for the couple, right? And they cut down the trees we talked about in Gittin, etc., to make the chuppah. But you basically, a person makes a wedding for his oldest son, and he makes it in a house, and they, celebrate in the house. That house then belongs to the son. Kan'o. The son gets to keep the house automatically, without saying it explicitly, and the father can't pull it back.
No, his father makes it in the father's house.
No. Well, we'll see in a second. But let's assume it's an empty house. It's a new house. So basically, you build a house, or you have a house, and you say we're having the wedding in this house.
He built the house for his son, then, right?
So that's what Rabbi Chanina is saying. We're going to get to some details in a second. Just we'll be clear about it. But the assumption is that he built it for the son, and that it's a gift for the son for the wedding. And if the week later the father says, you know what, it's time for you to go home now, the son can say, this is my home. Okay. However, says Rabbi Chanina, Dafka Gadol, it's only true about your oldest son. And Dafka Betula, it's only true if he marries a Betula, virgin. The Dafka Ishto Rishona, it's only the first wedding. And Dafka Shisio Rishon, it's only if the father marries off that son first, meaning it's in this very special circumstance where it's the first oldest son to a virginal bride who's never been married before, and he's never been married before, and this wedding happens first, then it's assumed that this is part of the package. Okay. Now, says that's Rabbi Chanina. We're going to discuss it.
Does he keep the house regardless? Let's say he gets divorced in 3 weeks. Is it his house?
Yeah, it's his house. Yeah, no, it's no backseas. So he keeps the house. Now, Pshita, says the Gemara, it's obvious that Yichelo Aviv Bayit Va'aliyah. It seems, now again, the Gemara's clear. I don't know who it's obvious to, but it's obvious to the Gemara that if the father says, I'm giving you this house, and or he doesn't say he's giving it, but he says we're having the wedding in this house. Valian, there happens to be a second story on the house that wasn't part of the whole procession and part of the week use. Bayit Kana. The son gets the house, but Aliyah lo Kana. He doesn't get the attic, right? If it's an apartment building, he doesn't get the whole place. If there's a Bayit Vaksadra, let's say there's a house and a porch. So what about the porch? Mahu. Does that also go to the son? Or let's say you have Shnei Batim Zelef Nimizeh. Or let's say there are two houses, one within the other, and the inner one, right, the one inside is the one where they had the wedding. So what about the outside house? Is that considered to be part of it or not part of it? So Teiko, we don't really know in those cases. So the exact details of this rule are not 100% clear at this point. Meitzvei. Well, ask the Gemara, we have a problem from a Braita.
But do we get an answer to this or not?
Teiko, you never get an answer to.
So then, I mean, so what's going to happen in reality? The guy, he has a porch there. Anyone else can use the porch or move on?
His father owns the house.
Can live on the porch. I mean, what is it?
His father owns the porch. I don't know. His father will go sit on the porch and I don't know. Yeah, they didn't have a lot of space. But I mean, but again, Teiko means that we don't know. And I guess the halacha would be if whoever got it first would get it, right? Definitely motzi mechaver lev haraya. But let's clarify a little bit. Meitvei, ask the Gemara, what about the following Braita? Because the Braita goes into this in great detail. Clearly, this was a common practice. Maybe when my daughters get married, we'll see if they adopt this practice. But it was a common practice. It wasn't on the girl's side. It was on the boy's side, right? To give a house. So Meitvei, ask the Gemara from the following Braita. The Braita says, what if yichad lo aviv bayit uklei bayit, right? Let's say the father designates, yichad is miyached, a house and the kli bayit, meaning there's a house that the father says the wedding's going to be in this location, and all of the clay bayit, the couch and the sofa and the beds, etc., are going to be used for the wedding. Says the Braita, interestingly, then clay bayit kana. Then the son gets to keep the table, keep the chairs, but bayit lo kana, he doesn't get to keep the house. Now that doesn't make any sense. Why doesn't he get to keep the house, right? We just said that if you designate a wedding to be in a house, you keep the house. Here we're saying if there's furniture and a house, you don't keep the house, you only keep the furniture. So I'm Rabbi Yirmiyah, where it says Rabbi Yirmiyah, well, it's true, but that's talking about a case where the father clearly lived in the house. And when the father clearly lived in the house, then the father keeps the house, but the son only gets to keep the possessions that were used for the wedding. So then the house was being sort of rented, so to speak, for the wedding. The table and chairs, the son gets to keep and take home with him to whatever his new house is going to be. How do you know the father is staying in the house? So says Rabbi Yirmiyah, it's like the father has his whole otsar, his whole wine collection in the house. So clearly he's not giving his son his wine collection. He's staying in the house. He indicated that I want to live there. Again, you would imagine, and I always wondered this question, why don't you just say things, right? But whatever, there was a time where they didn't feel like saying it too clearly. So the father had his own private collection of wine, let's say, in the house. This otsar could mean a storeroom of any, it's not necessarily a wine, but anything that you store, right? He had his coin collection in the house. And so clearly he's not giving up the house. He's giving up the possessions that are part of the wedding. Nahardai said, well, he doesn't have to leave his otsar in the house. Let's say he leaves his fish in the house. Shofcha diyoni does not mean that. It means, dovecoat, right? So meaning, as long as the father leaves something in the house that he is going to come back to, he's not giving the house. Rav Yehuda and Rav Papi said, Afila atzitza daharsana. Even if he left, I love this, atzitza daharsana means a pot of harsana, or like herring, like pickled, not pickled, fried fish. Yeah, we learned all about this. We love them, right? So he left behind some food in the fridge even. No, not any food maybe, but very special food, right? And meaning that as long as the father made clear that he's living in this house, that it's his own house, he's either, maybe it's a house outside of town where he goes to once in a while when he goes hunting or something. But as long as he left possessions in the house, then it indicates he wants to come back there. Mar Zutra, it happened with Mar Zutra himself, that he married off his son. He was afraid the son was going to keep the house. So Talale Sandala, he hung his shoes in the house to indicate that I'm coming back here, right? I'm not leaving this house. You can use the house for a week. You can, be married and have your shever brachot in the house, but I'm keeping the house. Rav Ashi Ansivilibre, Rav Ashi married off his son, Vitale Ashisha Demishcha, he hung, a shisha, a jug or jar of oil. So again, the point is that as long as you make it clear that you want to keep ownership of the house, then you keep ownership of the house. It's only if you don't do anything like that the son gets to keep it without any further details.
It has to be obvious what that symbol is, that it belongs to the father.
I
mean,
mean,
if you leave a jug of oil, maybe one of the guests came by and left a jug of oil. Father should put his name on it or something like that.
So I think your point, and I agree with it 100%, is that the Gemara gave 5 examples, right? And it doesn't imply that they disagree with each other, but there must be different ways that a person can show that they, want ownership of something. Now, continues the Gemara at the end, 5 lines from the bottom. Amar Mar Zutra, there are these 3 things that the Rabbanan made them like hilchata. I mean, they made them like halacha Moshe Misinai, like there's a established rule, don't argue with it. But below tama does not mean without a reason. It means without a smach, without something that they are relying on. So essentially, they made them up, but they made them as full halachot. Chadaha. One is the thing we just told you. This whole halacha of marrying off your child in a home, they get to keep the home. This was considered to be the social norm. And the Rabbanan made this up. It makes a lot of sense, right? It's the way people give things over to their children. But that if you say to your son, go get married in my house, and then the son gets to assume, I'm not leaving after 7 days, right? I get to live in that house, unless you make it very clear. Idach, another of the 3 cases, Dam Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, is a case which we've had several times already in this Masechta. It's hakotev konech chasav leishto, a person who before he dies says, I want to give everything to my wife. He doesn't really want to give everything to his wife. He wants to give her the responsibility to oversee the distribution of his estate so that everybody respects her, right? We said before. Lo asa el apatrapa. He wants to make her the executor, not the owner, because he wants the children to treat her well, because they've got to get their check from her, but he doesn't really want to give it to her. And idach, the third halacha that they made a halacha without a real smach to it, damarav, a person who says, mana li biyadcha, Taneo Leploni, a person walks over to Shimon and says, Shimon, you owe me $100, right? I have a mana in your hand, meaning you have $100 of mine. I want you to give it to Levi. If you do it b'mamad shlashtan, which means in the presence of all three people, in front of Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, right? Reuven goes to Shimon and says, you owe me $100. I want you to give it to Levi. That's enough, kana. That is enough to be kona. You don't need to write a shtar and make a kinyan and do anything else. As long as all of the parties are there, they made a takana, which makes sense, for commerce and things, that's enough, and that you don't need to do a further takana. Again, all three of these things are things that Chachamim said. They're all in force, and they all don't have an exact source, but they were made for the betterment of society. Okay, turn the page to Daf Kuf Mem Daled Amabad. We're at a new Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Achim Hashutfim. If you've got brothers who are also partners, right? So they were both. They're brothers, and they're also partners, and nafal echad mehem umanot. One of them literally means it falls into a profession. We're going to see in the Gemara, this means that he was sort of assigned by the king to do some work, right? So this brother got a call from the government saying, you are needed in Washington. We want you to do a job. And then he makes money from that job, makes $100. Nafal emsa, that actually goes to the estate. And the reason it goes to the estate is because we assume that he's doing it as a representative of the family. We'll see why in the Gemara. Now, a separate halacha, but related, is chalav v'nitrape. If the son, any of these sons, right, gets sick and he goes to the doctor and it costs, $1,000 to pay the doctor's bills, nitrape mishal atzmo, he's got to pay his own doctor bills. So his profits go to everyone, but his own doctor bills go to himself. Now, what does that all mean? Says the Gemara, Tana, the Braita explained, Hi umanut. When we say in our Mishnah, you're going to umanut, it means you are going to umanat hamelech. You're basically being forced to work for the king. It's not a choice you made. And so basically, we'll see in a second exactly what it means, but the government basically came and said, one of you has to come work. And so you working is not working necessarily individually, it's working as a representative of the family. Tanura Banan, now the Braita explains, elaborates on that. Says the Braita, it depends, of course. If they assign one of the brothers of an estate to be in a gabai literally means a collector, right, of money, or a tax collector, or pomostis, which we usually mean military, right? So you make him go, what does the Rashbam say? Sorry, the Rashbam has lochem, right?
Policeman. He says policeman.
Magistrate.
Yeah, well, lochem to me means a fighter, but okay, someone in the military, and he says lochem milchamot b'lashon Yavan, right?
He says postamos is a shoter, a policeman.
Where am I reading something different? Okay, so
Rabbeinu Chanano, he gives the parish of Rabbeinu Chanano, postamos lochem milchamot b'lashon Yavan.
Got it, right? No, okay, I'm reading the same thing.
But that's he's quoting Rabbi Chanano. He himself says he's a policeman.
Right, got it. Correct. So you are, thank you. Meaning it's a government job, basically. So says the Braita, it depends on why he got the job. In Machmata Achim, if he got the job because it basically, this family, right, there was a responsibility, which could happen. It happened all the time, right? They said, family so-and-so has to provide a soldier, right? Then he's a representative of the family and everything he does goes for the family. So then the Achim. But in Machmat Atzmo, but if they're looking for the most qualified person to be the tax collector, or to be the general, or to be the policeman, then they chose him as an individual, and then la'atzmo, goes to himself. That's what the Braita says. Now says the Gemara, one second. In machmat achim la'achim shita, right? Of course, if it says, they're choosing one of the brothers, and he's just a representative of the brothers, he's a representative of the brothers. So obviously, answers the Gemara, lo tzricha, no, you need it in a case to charif tfei. Right? In a case where, although they did say you want one of the brothers, he is very sharp, meaning he's good with numbers, let's say, or if the military is good with whatever it takes to be good in the military. He's much better, meaning he's got unique capabilities. And so Madatema, you would have thought that the reason that they picked him is Chorfei Garamle. They picked him because of his charifut, because of his extra skills, to Kamash Malan, that even though he was the one who was special, the fact that the government made it as an appointment of the family means he's a representative of the family. And if it's the family money that it went up in value, then it should go to the entire family. Now, Tanur Abanan continues the Braita, and this will explain the second part of our Mishnah. Sorry, I'm still here, right? Yeah. Echad min ha'achim shenatal 200 zuz lemot Torah. Right? A father dies, he leaves behind an estate, and one of the brothers says, they haven't yet distributed the estate, right? But he says to the brothers, look, I want to take 200 zuz lemot Torah, or lemot umanut, or to go to a profession, right? He wants to go to trade school. So he says, this is what I want to do with my money. Now, they haven't quite split up the estate yet. But the point we're going to talk about here for a second is that the brother wants to move to New York, right, to learn Torah. And he says to the other brothers, but the estate is still supposed to support me. So I want a check to pay for my house because the estate is going to pay my basic needs until we split it up. Says the Braita, Yecholin ha'achtim lomar lo, the brothers can say to him, look, if you stay with us and you live with the family, we're going to provide for sustenance. We're going to give you money basically to eat and to live, right? However, if you don't want to stay with us, then you don't get any food. Now ask the Gemara why. Why don't they have to give it to him wherever he lives, right? Meaning a brother would have lived here, you would have provided 3 meals a day for him as part of the estate. So why don't you send him food wherever he is? So says the Gemara, it's not so simple. This actually supports what Rav Huna said. Because Rav Huna, Berkat Habayit Beruba. It's a very interesting statement. That there's a blessing in the house when there's many people in the house. Okay? Now the question is, what exactly does that mean, right? Berkat Habayit Beruba is that the house is better when there's many people in the house. So the simplest explanation, which is not the only explanation, is that, if someone, it's like basically, what do you call it? Volume, right? Margin. What do you call it when you have a lot of people? Anyway, so there's that, it's easier to run a house when you have many people in the house, right? Let's say you have 10 people in the house.
It's called economy of scale.
Thank you. That's what I'm going for, scale, right? When you buy food for that 10th person, it doesn't cost a tenth of the cost, right? It adds a little bit more when you have many people in a house. So obviously the incremental cost of each individual person is less as you get bigger. And when this guy decides I'm leaving the house and renting a place and getting my own food in New York, it's going to be a much higher cost for him than it would have been had he stayed at home. Okay. So therefore they don't have to pay for that. So ask the Gemara, okay, maybe that's true.
It's easier that you say that, for instance, you have 10 people in the house and there are leftovers. The people in the house can eat the leftovers, for instance. If he lives by himself, leftovers go bad, he throws it out. He has to buy more because he can't eat all the leftovers.
Fair enough. That's another detail. So ask the Gemara though, literally the feed got to buy it. But why don't you at least give him the amount that you would have paid for him in the house? Meaning, it's true that if there's $100 a day for feed and there's 10 people, it's not that the 10th person adds $10 more. But the 10th person might add $3 more or $5 more, right? So it's true that he doesn't cost as much as an individual, but he still costs something. So give him whatever that is that you would give even in a large family. And somewhere hachanami, you would. Yeah, absolutely. It's not saying he gets nothing. It's saying that he can't demand and say, I want you to pay my room and board wherever I am. Because had he lived with the brothers, his room and board would have been less proportionally. So that's the halacha. Now the Mishnah said, chalav nitrape, that if the brother became sick and then got better, or not got better, he paid to get better, then nitrape mishalatzmo, he's got to pay for his own doctor's bills, because you assume it's not a family thing when a person gets sick. Shalach Ravin mishmeid Rabbi Lah. Now Ravin sent a message from Rabbi Lah, very fascinatingly, that lo shanu ella shechala b'pshia. This is only true if he became sick through his own negligence. Like, let's say, as my bubby would say, you went outside in the winter without a coat, right? I don't know if that really counts, but nonetheless, right? Or he did something. He went rock climbing and fell off and broke his leg, right? So that is a pshia, I guess, sorry to say, right? So that is considered to be his own responsibility. Aval be'ones, if he did it on be'ones, sorry, I forgot the Gemara uses the example. Sorry, if he did it be'ones, then nitrape mishal emtza. If it happened accidentally, then he does pay for the middle because he is still considered to be part of the estate. One explanation for this is that the assumption is that if the father was alive and the father was still supporting his family and a kid got sick, the father would have paid for those bills, right? So if the father has now died and there's an estate, but the estate in some way is in place of the father until you split it up, right? And so as long as you haven't split it up, you can assume that the estate, or quote unquote, the father, would have paid for his doctor bills. Ask the Gemara, I forgot the Gemara does this, I apologize. Hechidami b'pshia, traveling, so it's harder for me to prepare. Hechidami b'pshia, what is a case of a person getting sick on their own fault? So the Gemara does not use my example of climbing up and falling down rock climbing, but it's Kid Rabbi Chanina, right? We've had this statement of Rabbi Chanina many times before. Dama Rabbi Chanina, hakol b'dei shamayim, right? Everything is given to heaven, and it's not your fault. Chutz mitzinim upachim, except what tzinim pachim is how we read it. Except for that, which is tzinim pachim, right? Which literally means cold. Tzinim pachim means like an obstacle or putting something in your way. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, tzinim pachim b'derech ikesh. Right, cold and obstacles will trip you up or make you crooked on the road. Shomer nafsho yirchak mehem. A person who watches his soul will go away from those things. Meaning, you have the ability to avoid getting in the cold or going in front of a stumbling block. And if you choose to do that, you're on your own luck, right? So you can't go outside in the middle of the cold and say, God will protect me. Those are things that you control. That's what it means. And if a person is negligent about their own health, the other example people always use when I learned this is smoking, right? Things like that. And you do things that are clearly bad for you, have to be known at that time, then that is considered to be your own fault, and the estate does not have to pay for you.
How do you distinguish an onus here? If someone's, I don't know, walking on the street and unfortunately someone from above drops a brick on a person, that's onus. I mean, he didn't expect that, okay? But that's different from a person who acquires perhaps a chronic disease. Let's say a person that gets sick with cancer. That's not the same thing as someone dropping a brick on that person, right? They're two different levels. But would both of them be considered onus in this situation, that the family would support him?
So I think they would, yes. I think onus in this case, again, I can't say I know for sure the halacha, but I think onus is as opposed to something that's pshia. Pshia meaning you willfully did something foolish to cause it to happen. I think so. I think the Gemara in here does not discuss that detail, right, of onus, meaning here I think onus is not necessarily a brick fell on your head, which is clearly an onus. It's a natural course, let's say, which I think is how we usually think of cancer. Though some cancer, I guess, is probably not. Let's do one more Mishnah because we got time, and that's what today's daf. So it says the Mishnah in the middle of Kuf Mem Daled Amabet. Ha'achim shish asu miksatan shushbinut b'chayei ha'av. So this gets into, and we're going to have this much more of this tomorrow. There was a concept back then, which I don't think we quite have nowadays, at least not to this extent. We definitely don't have, called shushbinut. And shushbinut meant like, I don't know how we translated shushbin is like you're the, I've seen people say groomsman, but I don't exactly know what that means. But you're part of the wedding party, right, for a person. And there was a very strong tradition then that if, Reuven married off its son and Shimon sent over a wedding present, that when Shimon married off his son, Reuven would send over a wedding present. And it was to such an extent, now it wasn't just like what we call a wedding present. Shushbinut was a very sort of societally defined wedding present where and again, it could be you supported them, you gave them money, you gave them food, but the assumption was that it was almost like a debt. And that if one family paid for another family's wedding, that other family or part of it would pay them back. And to the extent that says our Mishnah, let's say, ha'achim asu miksatan shushbinut b'chayei av. Now we'll see in the Gemara that this case is a little bit complicated, but you have a bunch of brothers, okay? And some of them, let's say, were made shushbinut b'chayei av, meaning when the father was alive, another family gave money to those brothers to let them get married. And then the father died, and this other family, I'm going to use names for these families, okay? The family of Reuven and the family of Shimon. So the family of Shimon has sons, and Shimon, when those sons got married, Reuven's family sent over shushbinut. Shimon then dies, and then Reuven's sons are getting married. So says the Mishnah, chazra shushbinut. If then the family of Shimon is returning the gift and becoming shushbinim and giving money back to the family of Reuven, chazra la'emtza. That money comes not from the individual son that went to the wedding and brought $1,000 or brought a gift. It goes from the estate. Because, says the Mishnah, shushbinut nigbeit bebeitin. Because shushbinut is something that's an identified debt that you can collect in beitin. Once Reuven's family gives Shushbinut to Shimon's family has a responsibility to give Shushbinut back to Reuven's family. And therefore, if they do, it's not, Shushbinut used to be given by an individual, but it's not that the son of Shimon that brought the Shushbinut gave it from himself, he gave it from the estate. And therefore, you collect from the estate. However, let's say a person is just a very nice guy, so it's not officially shushbinut, but his friend is getting married or his friend is making a bar mitzvah or whatever, and he sends over a barrel of wine, right? There might be an expectation that the friend's going to send back a barrel of wine when his kid gets married, but that's not defined. Ein nigbin bebeitin, that is not collected in beitin, and therefore it's not an official debt. That's just we just view that as being an act of kindness. So
is the debt held by the parents who are paying for the wedding or for the bride and groom?
So our assumption in these Mishnayot is that it's paid by the parents, that the parents have a responsibility to make a wedding for their children. We're not going to really get into detail if it's minor children, adult children, but the assumption is that a parent pays for the wedding, and if you pay for the wedding of that son, that family then will pay for the wedding of your son, basically. Let's keep going. Let's see the Gemara. So it says the Gemara. Let's get some details of this. For a minute, we're going to ask a contradiction because the Braita seemed to say the opposite. Right? Our Mishnah made it sound, the case I explained in our Mishnah was where the family of Shimon basically was a recipient of Shushbinut from Reuven's family. Shimon then died, and then the family of Shimon pays back Shushbinut, and we say it comes from the family. However, the Braita makes it sound like we're talking about a different case. We're talking about a case, says the Braita, for a mini, we have a contradiction because the Braita sounds like that it's not, well, let's read the Braita. Shalach lo aviv shushbinut, if the father of, the father sent the son with a gift of shushbinut, meaning Reuven, let's say, Shimon said to one of his sons, Shimon has 3 sons, said to one of his sons, go and bring a gift to Reuven's family. Kishihi chozeret, when that gift comes back to the family, right, and over time, when Reuven's family sends back shushbinut, chozeret lo, it goes back to that son, right? So again, Shimon said he has 3 sons, and I can't call them Reuven, Shimon, and Levi because it's Shimon. But Shimon has 3 sons, call them A, B, and C. If son A is given from Shimon a message, you bring shushbinut to the family of Reuven. Then when son A gets married and Reuven's family sends back shushbinut, says the Braita, it goes to that son. It doesn't go to the family, which seems to contradict the Mishnah a little bit. And though we didn't quite address that, and continues the Braita.
That Shimon died.
Shimon
We're saying
did
the
die.
other way, that Shimon died. So then how would he?
Shimon did die. And the gift
Right.
came back to the son of Shimon who had brought Shushbinut to Reuven. So we say that goes to that son, not to the family, not to the estate. Okay, let's keep going though. It continues the Braita, Nishtalcha le'aviv Shushbinut, right? If they sent Shushbinut, right, to one of the Shtalcha le'aviv Shushbinut, so they didn't send with him, but the father basically sent Shushbinut, right? Meaning it was sent to the father. So again, Shimon is the father. Shimon, Reuven's family sent Shushbinut to one of the family of Shimon, and then Shimon died. Reuven's son got married. Kishi chozeret, and now the Shushbinut is going back. Then chozeret min ha'emsa, right? Then it goes back from the middle, meaning it goes back from the entire estate. So this implies that when the estate pays, it goes from everybody. But when a gift comes in, it goes to the particular son who it was being reciprocated to, which is not like our Mishnah. Amar Rabasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, no. That's in fact what our Mishnah meant to say. Kitnan nami matnitim, when our Mishnah was talking about it, it was talking about the second case, where nishtalcha le'aviv tnan, where shushbinut are going to the father, that's where it goes to the estate. But when it goes to an individual son, it goes to that son. Ask the Gemara, how could our Mishnah mean that? Our Mishnah, the words in our Mishnah were Achim she'asu miksatan shushbinut. We're talking about a case where brothers, where some of them were the shushbinim, were the individuals of the shushbinim, which is what you just said goes to that son. Our Mishnah said it goes to everybody. Katani. Our Mishnah said the brothers became shushbinut. It says, well, you're right. We have to change the words, and the words should be tani lemiksatan. That our Mishnah meant to say, not where the brothers, some of them were shushbinut, it became to some of them, meaning they weren't giving a gift, they were receiving the gift. Ask the Gemara, Chazra Shushbinu Katani. Again, the Mishnah doesn't seem to imply on this case because the Mishnah says very clearly that Chazra Shushbinu, that you're getting a repayment. Hachikamer.
Wait a second. We initially, the Mishnah was saying that the Shushbinut came from the family whose father died. That this was the Chazara, right? So the father wasn't there, no longer alive to return the Shishbinut. So his entire estate was giving it back, right?
Say that again. Sorry, I
That the father, the return of the Shishbinut. In that case, that group, that father was no longer alive, so it came from his estate. They were returning the Shishbinut, right?
Correct.
That's what the Mishnah is saying.
Sorry, so let me add names here because it got a little confusing because I can't use the regular names. But so the case of our Mishnah was where a father, when he was alive, said to one of his sons, this is the way we read our Mishnah. So when Shimon was alive, he said to not all his sons, he said to some of his sons, bring a present on my behalf to Reuven's family for a wedding. Then Shimon dies, and then Reuven's family reciprocates that gift to the son who was a Shishbin. So you might think that because that child acted as Shushbinut, he gets the money back. Our Mishnah said, no, it goes to the middle, okay? It goes to everybody. So even though son number one, we're going to call him son A of Shimon, was a Shushbin in the life of his father to the family of Reuven, when the family of Reuven comes and gives back money to that son for his wedding, it doesn't go to that son, our Mishnah said. It goes to the Emtza, it goes to the middle, right? So that was the Mishnah. The Braita, on the other hand, made it sound like, and I'll read the words again in the Braita, that Shalach lo aviv shushbinut, that if a father sent a son to be the shushbin, right, and then kishi chozeret, when it comes back, it goes back to that son, chozeret lo. So ask the Gemara, how does that make any sense with our Mishnah, right? Our Mishnah made it sound like that when it goes back to everybody. And this Braita says when it goes back to that son. So we tried to, what we're saying now is we're rereading the whole Mishnah. And what the Mishnah is basically saying is not where brothers became Shushbinot. It's talking about a case where they paid Shushbinot to the brothers. They were not first Shishbinot, right? So we asked, what about the fact that it says
It doesn't seem like it's a problem. If you assign the son, it seems like it would be more questionable if the father of the group that gave the Shbinut, initially he had died. In this case, if the father appoints the brother to give the son A, to give his Shbinut to his brother's
you're spot
family,
on.
and then it comes back to him. What's the difference? Whether the father is alive or not alive. This son gave it to him. So to divide it between an estate, if the father's out of the picture, it doesn't even matter. If the son, now A, gives his Shbinut to his cousin, let's say, then it shouldn't even matter to us whether the father's alive or not.
So let me be very clear. Well, you almost got the next statement of the Gemara. You were close. You fell short at one point. Rabasi is going to give your answer in a second. But the one thing that he adds that you didn't say is that this money always came from the father. So even if the father Shimon said to his son A, bring money to your cousin, right? Bring a gift to your cousin, it comes from the father. So it's not that the son has his own money that he's bringing to the cousin. But let's read that inside. So anyway, so the Mishnah, the first answer is that you just have to change the Mishnah. The Mishnah doesn't really mean what it says. But then what you just said, Ken, Rabasi Amar, exactly what you said. Lo kasha. There's no contradiction between this case and the Mishnah because kan bistam, kan b'mefarish. The difference between the two cases is whether the father assigned one son to do it or whether the father said to his sons, look, I want someone to go to the wedding of, Rachel and bring this gift on behalf of our family. And so that's what stam means. Stam is where the father said to his family, someone be our messenger and bring a cow for the wedding, right? And one of the sons said, okay, I'll go do it. In which case, it's not that it was done specifically for him. He represented the estate. And if when he gets married 5 years later, they bring back a cow, it doesn't go to him, it goes to the whole family. But if you're mifaresh, like you just said, Ken, if the father says to son A, I want you to be the messenger, then he's giving it basically as a gift to that son to be the messenger, and it goes back to him. Ketitanya, in fact, the Braita says that explicitly. The Braita says, Shalach lo aviv shushbinut, right? If the father sends with him that this one son should be the shushbinut, then kishi chozeret lo. Then when it goes back to that son. But shalach aviv shushpinut stam, if the father sends it stam, no, you can't just send it stam. They didn't have Amazon, right? He would send it through one of his sons, but he didn't care which son brought it. Then kashi chozeret le'emsa. Then when it comes back, it goes back to the middle, right? So that is the first explanation. I think I'm going to stop here, even though we're not quite done, because the next case, Shmuel's answer is very complicated. No, you know what? Let's leave. Does anyone have energy to do a few more lines?
Yeah.
A few more.
What happens if you have a different number of kids?
So right, so that's the point here, is that it's not, so although shushbinut is sort of a contract, I don't think it's meant, again, I don't know the exact details, as like you gave $1,000, they have to give you $1,000 back, right? It's meant that, and that you're right, there could be inequities if one family has 2 kids and one family has 10 kids, right? But there was some societal expectation. I'm not sure if you would have to give to all 10 in that case, to give back. I don't, right? So I think, and the question is right, they gave you $1,000, you go back with a present that's worth $10. Probably you couldn't get away with that.
No, but what if one family has 3 weddings? So for you have one, do they owe you 3 for
I
your,
don't know. I don't know
and you
the
only
answer.
have one child?
Right. I don't know the exact answer, to be honest. Shmuel says, let me read Shmuel's answer. Shmuel says, the case in the Mishnah is actually a very different case, because the case in the Mishnah, usually you can demand to get back the shushbinut, right, to the individual. But here it's talking about Hachava Mayaskinan. The case in our Mishnah is Hacha biyavam askinan. Here we're referring to a case of a yavam. She'eno notel b'ro'oik b'muchzak. What's the case? The case is where the person died and made a yavam, meaning the brother died without children, right? So basically, we have Reuven and Shimon, right? Shimon said to one of his sons, look, I want you to bring a gift to Reuven's family. And that son did that. Usually in that case, when Reuven's family brings back a gift, it goes specifically to that son. So that son would normally get the gift back since he brought the first gift. However, that son died and he had no children, right? So the son who brought the gift died without children. And his brother, again, I wish we had names here. We're going to call, let's give names. We'll call him Menashe.
He's bringing back money. He's bringing back gifts to help this fellow get married, right? So how can you say he died without children? Isn't that the idea? That he's giving it back to one cousin gives it to he gives it to his cousin when his cousin's getting married, right? So now when he's getting married, it goes back to him. But how can you say he's gonna die without children? He didn't get married.
Right. So the case here, let me do the case. It's Reuven and Shimon are the 2 people. Shimon had 2 sons. We're going to call them Menashe and Ephraim. Ephraim brought over the gift to Reuven's family, right? So in theory, when Reuven's family gives back a gift, it should go to Ephraim. Ephraim died without children. And now when Ephraim died without children, his brother, Menashe, has to marry his wife, right? So that's the wedding we're talking about, right? And so basically, Menashe now marries Ephraim's wife.
But we initially said this was a case where they
Wait,
were
listen.
exchanging gifts prior to a wedding, right?
So there's a wedding. Menashe's marrying Ephraim's wife. And
wait a minute, but if Ephraim should have gotten it, how can Ephraim die without children if he was never married? The idea is that he's getting the gift back for his own wedding.
No, so Ephraim got married. I don't know who got gifts at that time. Ephraim got married. Ephraim died without children. Menashe now is marrying the wife of Ephraim, which is what Yibum is, okay? And usually you would have thought in most cases, and there are 5 other brothers, right? So Ephraim is marrying the wife of Menashe, right? Or whatever the case I said. And so you would have thought that when the gift now comes back to the house, it should go to Ephraim, who's married, I'm sorry, I kept getting the names wrong, but whoever's doing the marriage of the wife of the one who died. Because as a Yavam, remember, one of the halachot of Yavam is that you basically get all the possessions, you get the right of the brother whose wife you're marrying. Right? That's the whole point of being a Yavam, is that you inherit.
Unless it's late after the marriage or it never came at all, and the debt now goes from the dead brother to the living brother.
So, sorry, I missed what you said, James. Can you say that again?
It sounds to me either the gift came late or the gift never came at all, and we're just transferring the debt owed to the first brother, to the second brother.
So I'm sorry, I missed it again. I
What he's
apologize.
saying is that the first brother, that Ephraim, what I was saying earlier, we're talking about a wedding, returning a gift at the wedding. More or less, he's adding on what I was saying. So Ephraim should have gotten this gift for whatever reason. This brother, Reuven's son, never gave the gift that he should have given. So now in the interim, Ephraim died. She said, "Oh, I should have given it to Ephraim, but I didn't. So I'm giving it to Manasseh, his brother, because Ephraim died without children. The gift should have gone to Ephraim because that was the reciprocal gift that I got when I was getting married, but he didn't have a chance. I got lost in the mail. I forgot to give it. Now I have to give it to somebody. I'll give it to Manasseh, who's marrying the wife of Ephraim.
Okay,
But I could have given it to Ephraim.
I think that's a good thought, but I mean the technical part of it is that the Yavam gets all the rights of the brother's wife, of the brother whose wife he's marrying, right? Widow he's marrying. Either way, you would have thought that in that case he gets those gifts, but says Gemara, you don't, and the reason you don't in our Mishnah, and it goes la'emtza, it goes to the entire estate, not to one particular brother, is she'eno notel b'ra'oi k'bemuchzak. It's because remember that, like we talked about before, although you get everything that the brother had, you don't get things that are due to the brother. And since when the brother died, as you put it, the gift was still lost in the mail, it wasn't his yet. And so anything that comes after his death doesn't automatically go to the brother who takes over for him. So long story short, that's where we're going to stop at 6 lines from the bottom. We'll pick it up there tomorrow. And we will continue the discussion of Shushbinut, and I'll read a little bit more about it. And I just want to add, so tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m. is okay. James, Miriam both said yes. Ken, can you do 7:30
It's a
p.m.?
bit difficult to drop when I'm so busy in the afternoon, evenings. It's a bit difficult to drop in the middle. I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. I mean, later would be better.
Is later better for you, Ken?
It would be better later.
8 o'clock?
The later, the better. 9 o'clock, maybe.
No, 9 o'clock's too late for me. I'm traveling. I can do 8 if it will help you, Ken. If not,
Well, you're traveling again tomorrow night?
no, I'm traveling in the morning, which is why I'm exhausted at night. But
I mean, I'll see. I mean, you set a time. If I can make it, I make it.
so we're gonna do 7:30, and I hope you can make it.
It would be the
Do you-
morning. I set aside morning time. It's better in the morning, but
Next week we'll be back in the morning, God willing. Okay. Good night, everyone. I'll put it up.
Thank you. Shavua tov.
Thank you, Shvato.
Make sure to send your wedding presents
it's an
on
interesting story.
Yeah, it's not really fair. You have 5 girls.
time.
I only have 3 kids.
Okay, well, we're gonna have to negotiate. Okay, everyone, good night.
Whoever gets married first, we'll see.
Okay.
Are married, both married, both.
Schmober.